Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Valeria Card Kingdoms and all of the expansions. Now, this is not a normal review that I have on the channel. It's not a game that's passing by a cult of the news, something I'm covering today, and we'll see whether it lasts or not. Rather, this game has been in my collection for years now, for maybe 6, 7 years, I don't know exactly how long, but even the most recent expansion is several years old at this point, but I've had the opportunity to play all of it. I've had the opportunity to play the base game, the expansions, the first expansion which didn't really add much, the second expansion which added a lot, and then the third expansion which made the game cooperative and totally changed up the way the game plays, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts on all of them. Now, this is not a normal 12 by 12 review. If you don't know, 12 by 12 review is a format I have on the channel where I play a game 12 times, or at least 12 times in all its different configurations, and give that over. This is effectively the same thing, but it's not the same thing only because I didn't specifically play it 12 times this year is the reason why it's different, but ultimately it is the same idea. Walking into this review, you already know I like the game. The reason I'm reviewing this is because I want to solely cover all the games I know and love that I haven't really talked about on the channel as much or as dedicatedly. I want to solely cover them all because, hey, if I'm going to review everything that passes by my doorstep on the way to the next game that you're forgotten, I also want to review the games that have stood the test of time. And so, I don't know how often these videos will happen, but one at a time I'll slowly be going through my entire collection of games that have made it for me, and Valeria Card Kingdoms is one of those. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of how the game plays, I'll talk about what the expansions add, I'll tell you why I like it, and also why it may well not be a game for you. There are some games in my collection that I have had for years and I love, and most of the gaming space loves too. This is not one of them. This is actually recently in a video I did of top 10 guilty pleasures. This is a game that's good, it's accepted, people like it, it got 3 expansions after all, but I definitely like it more than the average person does. But we'll get to all of that. Let's start off with how this game plays. And basically, this game has a classic Catan style vibe. You're going to start with 2 cards, a peasant and a knight, and your goal is to get as many points as possible. We'll get into how you get those, but one of the ways you're going to get those is from one of these dukes over here. You're going to have a duke that gives you different ways you score points in the game. You're going to start with 2 dukes, you'll choose one of them, and it'll define, hey, you get 2 points for every one of those symbols, 1 point for every domain, and 1 point for every 5 remaining resources. Resources in this game are a sore topic because some people love how completely overflowing with resources you'll be, and others not quite so much. So you have a certain vibe of what you're going for. You have a duke that's going to give you points. You're going to get points in game. You're going to get points for your domains. This little purple symbols of points. You're going to have points for defeating monsters, which brings us to this field. We have 5 monsters over here, 4 separate columns of monsters to go through, and everything you see here goes all the way down. You have 2 rows of citizens representing the 10 possible citizens that effectively are your tableau, how you're going to build and generate resources. And then we have domains over here. These are going to be 15 unique domains, 3 per stack, all of them completely different, and they'll each give you a way that they modify the game in one way, shape, or form, whether it's an instant benefit you get, whether it's an ongoing benefit, they're all going to be different, and there's a giant stack of them. You're only seeing a small subset in a game. And then every turn, you're going to go ahead and roll the dice, and that's going to define what activates. A 2 and a 2 right now means that you would activate any 2s. If you had any 2s in your domain, you would activate those twice because there's 2 2s. You'd also activate any 4s because it's a 4, and if you get nothing, you go ahead and take any one resource of your choice, and there you go. That's going to be, your roll. From there, you have 2 actions. Oh, before we get to that, everyone benefits. In the game, this is going to have a game style approach that's been in Machikaro, it's been in Space Base, it's been in Catan, where when you roll the dice, everyone gets things in the game. And so right now, you're going to look at your own cards, and you're going to decide whether if it's your turn, you get the left side, and if it's not your turn, everyone gets the right side. So anyone who has a barbarian can trade in 1 gold for 2 warfare over there. Anyone who has a 2 can get 1 coin. If it was their 2, if they were rolling the 2s on their turn, you get either 2 coins or 2 mana in the game. So I didn't get a lot, but I could go ahead and still do things in the game. To that end, I have my 1 resource over here, and you actually start with resources, so that's a different conversation, but you can take a few of 4 core actions in the game. The first action, the one I recommend you take never, is to get a resource. Simply take any 1 resource of your choice, that's going to be an action. Alternatively, you can go ahead and defeat a monster, you can buy a citizen, or you can buy a domain. Those are the options available to you. Monsters cost a little bit more to actually defeat over here. We have this monster who's a 1, you can take him out. We have the domains, they cost you a little bit more, they 15, 6, 11, 6, 12, that's a lot of gold, we don't have that yet. But then we have the citizens that are going to represent the backbone of how you grow in the game. And so let's actually give us our starting resources and take that 1 gold, so we have the starting resources we should have. And then we go ahead and we spend this over here. So we're going to spend the 1 gold, we're going to take a Hydromancer, we're going to add it to our tableau of creatures over here, or characters, citizens, or whatnot, and then we're going to go ahead and spend, let's go ahead and spend another gold and a mana. Mana is a wild resources. In the game, mana cannot be spent on its own. Well, it could sometimes be spent on its own. Over here we have a mana cost, but generally mana is used to augment another cost. If you need to defeat the Dire Bear and you only have 3 military might, but you do have 4 mana, well, as long as you spend at least 1 military, you can go ahead and add to that. Effectively, you have to spend at least 1 of the desired resource, but then mana can supplement the rest of it. So we're going to spend that 1 gold and that 1 mana. We're going to go ahead and buy a... we already have a knight over there. We're going to buy a condottiere over here and add that to our table. So we now have a 1, 5, 6, 7. It goes to the next person's turn. They roll the dice, and they roll a 3 and a 4. That condottiere is perfectly bought, because right now he's going to activate, and I'm going to get 2 resources of my choice, and I'll take 2 of the 2 coins over there and have that towards my next turn. Players are going to go around the table. On every person's turn, you get resources. Every time someone rolls a dice, you're getting those resources, but then additionally, you're going to go ahead on your turn, you take the actions to continue to buy more. You're going to start with 2 cards and that's it, but across the course of the game, you'll build up an entire smorgasbord of these cards that are going to add more and more to your tableau, and you can get more of them. Every card costs what it costs, but then it costs +1 for each card of that type you have. Hydromancer costs 1, but if I want a second one, it costs 2. If I want a third one, it costs 3, and so on and so forth as you go through it. And so you're building up more and more cards so that when it comes back to you, and you go ahead and you roll that 1, look at that, I'm now getting 4 mana over here. I'm getting 4 mana, which is awesome. That's going to be incredibly helpful, because this 1 activates both of these Hydromancers, this 5 will activate my Peasant, and then the 5 and the 1 together activate the 6, which is my Knight. Look what I just got, and we're barely into the game. From there, as you gather resources, you're going to start taking out those monsters. You're going to start looking at the monster piles, and they get scarier and scarier the further you get down those piles. You'll have monster piles of different strengths, but regardless of which pile you have, they get worse the further down you go. That kobold costs 1, and it costs 1 in mana, 5 warfare, gives you 3 points, and it also gives you 2 money and 1 mana back. But as you go further into the pile, there's more kobolds, but look at that, we have a gold golem over there. 3 and 7, and 4 points. A little more expensive, a little more reward. Look at our dragonkin, 3 and 3, and then finally we have the red dragon, which costs 6 mana, 12 military might, and it gives you 3 money for every one of these cards with these symbols, any of these you've done, and it gives you 7 points. The cards are going to get more and more expensive as you go through it, but eventually you will hopefully be able to gather enough to take them down, and it's going to be a big part of your strategy. But then again, so is the Duke you have. This Duke over here who wants 2 points for every helm. That means I specifically want to go for barbarians and knights and dreadnoughts more than other characters because they have those symbols. But I also want to buy the domains that have those symbols. So over here, the Watcher on the Water, if I have 6 money, let's go ahead and spend 3 money and 3 mana and buy this Watcher on the Water who lets me immediately return any 1 monster to the stack to gain 3 points, but also gives me these 2, which is 4 points right there because of Sir Gustavo the Wrathborn over there. He's also going to be points for the domains. So specifically going for any of these 3 cards will give me extra points because Gustavo's going to be giving me points for the symbols, points for the domains, and then at the end of the game, you're also getting points for all your remaining resources. That is a typical game of Valeria Card Kingdoms. There's some small other aspects to it, but the core idea is you roll dice, you gather resources, you take 2 actions, and it's your job to try to find what best economy of actions and cards will feed into your, well, just growth of everything. Because this game gives you a lot of resources. Those first few turns might feel a little starved, but as you build up your tableau more and more, you will be able to do basically whatever you want in it. And that's when we start having the expansions. The Flame and Fang expansion, is it called Flame and Fang? Flame and Frost. The Flame and Frost expansion is going to add more cards. Now the base game as is comes with more citizens, more monsters, and more domains than you'll play with in a given game, which means there's built-in variability to this. Sure, you can use this one, but you can use any different one. You can use any number of 1s, or any different ones. So you have 1s, 2s, 3s. These cards are going to shift up because of the different combinations you choose. It may not majorly affect the way you interact with the game, but it will give you different cards and different ways to trade in resources at different ratios for different rewards, which cards are better on other players' turns, which cards are better on your turns. Some of that and how you operate will be biased based on player count. You're playing a game that is more of a 2-player experience, you want the cards that are best on your turn. You're playing a 3 or 4-player game, stack up on those cards that are better on other people's turns because it's going to be other people's turns more often. And so there's going to be a bit of a variety mixed into the base box, but Flames and Frost added more variety, didn't change up the game in any meaningful way, it just added more cards, more monsters, more domains, and more citizens added to the game. Then we have the expansion, which is going to be the Crimson Seas. The Crimson Seas expansion majorly shifted up the way the game plays in a way that I really do enjoy, and we'll talk about my overall opinion soon, but I really do enjoy the Crimson Seas expansion. It's not something I'll always play with, but it does give you some extra things if I can find my boards that I stacked to the side. Here we go. We have this whole board that's going to be added to the Crimson Seas. This is going to go to the top of your card row, and it's going to give you a bunch of different aspects to explore. We're going to have nobles over here, 3 different nobles over here, which cost a lot of resources, but are going to give you multiple ways to score much more points in the game. We're going to have your area over here, which is going to give you these various card tokens over here that will reduce your cost of different things. We have set collections. So these over here, they're going to reduce your cost of resources. You'll get tokens to say, whenever you spend mana, spend 1 less mana. You're going to have the Arabi over here, which is going to give you a whole set of tokens, which if you can get sets of those tokens, you can get as many as 25 points for gathering these tokens. The problem is in order to explore these regions, and then we have the Execratus, the volcano, which is basically going to take resources, and then players can go there, take resources from the players, and players can go there and take them back. But whenever you roll 6s, it takes resources. Kind of like a robber in Catan. This is going to be added to the game, but so are more citizens, more monsters, and more domains that interact with it, because one of the things that changes is that now, all of a sudden, you need a map to go exploring those areas. So if you want to take one of your actions to go out into the wilds and go to those locations, you need to spend a map, so you need to gather maps. You're going to have different resources or different cards added to the game to make sure you have ways of gathering maps. You'll use those maps to go exploring, and you have a whole different facet of the game. The same core is there, but suddenly your actions can go towards a bunch of new areas, and you need to figure out your economy. How important is it to get a reduction on every single time you spend money? What if you get the reduction times 3? How much energy you want to spend getting that? Because at a certain point you need to start planning for the end game, and you might still be chasing discounts while other players are chasing points. Then the last expansion is going to be Darksworn. Darksworn goes full co-op in the game, giving you the same game system, but suddenly it changes the way the game operates. Suddenly there are walls in play, protecting you from the monsters. The monsters have to be defeated cumulatively by the other players, cooperatively, collectively taking down those monsters. There's a story mode, a little bunch of books that are going to flip. If we grab these books over here, you have the prophecy over here, you're going to flip this open and you're going to have a book, and you're going to read through it and having a goal you have to go through, and as you accomplish a goal, you'll continue to flip into the book, having more and more things going on. You're going to get a bunch of these sets of books to go through, all of them giving you different journeys of how you're going to go through this cooperative experience, while the monsters slowly try to take you down, and while you try to persevere and collectively combine your forces, your resources, everything you need to be able to take them down while accomplishing the goals in a slightly narrative aspect, but really much more focused on the fact that all the monsters in the game are attacking you, and you have to take them down instead. So it changes the way you interact with the puzzle, while still giving you the same core puzzle. And then there's modules. There's a whole bunch of things. There's going to be relics, going to be agents, going to be watchtowers, going to be all war towers, going to be all these other modules that are mixed into the game in different ways. As you know, when you exhaust these cards over here, you can have different events that are going to come out. So as soon as you exhaust a pile, you go all the way down. You have Betrayal of Bonds. All players must immediately flip a citizen. So you'll have different things that will mix up the pure game state as far as additional modules, in addition to the expansions that are all present. So let's talk about my opinion of the game. I really enjoy Valeria card kingdoms. The Valeria universe has a ton of games by now, and they've all worked for me in different ways. I've enjoyed it. I still have some in my collection. Most of them have passed through as I've decided whether they are or aren't for me, but ultimately Valeria card kingdoms was the first, and to me it is still the best. It is still the one that ultimately just gives you that feeling, that sense of satisfaction as you build a better tableau. You'll be overflowing with resources. You will have tons of resources in the game, and this game is not a puzzle about managing limited resources. There are times you'll be limited, make no mistake. Things can get expensive in the game, and I'm not saying you'll be completely flooded, but you will have plenty to work with. Sure, you might be a little tight on money, but you'll have plenty of warfare in the background. You're going to have to pick and choose where you're spending your money and how deep into these piles you're going. How expensive are the domains? How high into those expensive monster piles are you spending your resources? Factoring the math that if you're getting, a point for every 3 resources and you spend 18 on a creature, well, you just spent 6 points, so it has to be paying out at least 6 points back to you. But ultimately, the satisfying thing about the game is you're building up a roster of citizens, a bigger and better growing roster of citizens, and the game just lets you do things. Sure, you start the first few turns, you're like, I don't know how I'll ever take down the kobolds. I need 5 warfare and 1 mana, and that's just not going to happen because I'm spending it all. But as soon as you have 7 cards in your tableau, you start trying to figure out where you can spend stuff because you're getting so much. And you can choose how to manipulate that engine because, sure, the citizens are great, and they'll prop up your duke with the additional symbols that'll give you more points, but they're not the most efficient way of getting points, and so figuring out exactly when to continue to build into your tableau versus when you start focusing your economy of actions on cashing out of your tableau, on trying to take down those monsters, gather those domains, and work towards whatever abilities. And the domains, by the way, the domains are a smorgasbord of just different abilities in the game. You can have a wide variety of abilities from the domains, and every single one is different. By the time you mix in all the expansions, you have, 50, 60 domains, and you're only going to see maybe at most 15 per game, but in reality, probably closer to, 8, 9, maybe 10 domains in a game, and you're trying to figure out the combination of domains, of citizens, of monsters, combined with your duke, and figure out exactly what ways can you push into the system a bit further, a bit better, a bit more efficiently than the other players. So sure, you're flooded with resources. There's still going to be a player who wins the game. There's still going to be a player who figures out how to take advantage of the system a little better than the other players. The Flames and Frost expansion is a nice expansion. but it's just more of the same. It doesn't do anything new to me. And one of my critiques of Valeria, one of the things that I do find is not as much as I would like out of the system, is the card variety is great, but I don't feel meaningfully different when I play a different set of cards in Valeria than when I do in Dominion. When I play with 10 cards in Dominion and I mix up those 10 cards, it is an entirely different puzzle. When I do so in Valeria, I'd be hard-pressed to tell you which cards I like more or less. They all have different ratios of what they do, what they give you. I mean, if you look at the board, sometimes you'll have games where you have far less warfare coming in because you only have 1 or 2 warfare cards. So stuff like that can happen, and that can change the economy of the way you approach this. But ultimately, they just feel like either giving you resources or trading resources for the resources. They don't have text-based abilities, and to that end, they are limited in the variety that the citizens bring to the table. The domains give you plenty of abilities. I love the domains. The dukes shift up how you approach the game, the events, the relics, the agents, so many things there, but the citizens are plain boring in terms of the differences they bring to the table. Which means Flames and Frost to me was more about the domains and more about the monsters. The monsters don't really have a lot of abilities either, but they're at least a little bit more of a progression to them, so they're a little less vanilla, and they are focused a bit on the strength differences and the mana ratios and all of those things. So Flames and Frost, it's good. Didn't necessarily do a ton for me. Now, again, Crimson Seas. I keep forgetting the name of the expansion. Crimson Seas, on the other hand, Crimson Seas is a little bit more complex. I don't pull it out with everyone, but if you know Valeria, I do enjoy the additional choices it gives you. Suddenly, your choices in the game don't come down purely to, you know, citizen, domain, or monster, but suddenly there's a whole different economy of action there. There's a whole different way to interface with both point-gathering systems, ways to cheapen your costs, trying to figure out how to take advantage. Those nobles over there can be a huge source of points if you handle them right, but they're a good way of spending 9 money every single time and consistently increasing that cost. So suddenly they add another way to spend a lot of money, they add another way to get points, and you have to weigh up that against everything else in the game. Again, everything that costs resources is effectively costing you points because all your dukes give you points for resources in different ratios. And so figuring out what to do with that expansion, Darksworn, to me, not Darksworn, Crimson Seas, added a lot of additional things to the game that I really did enjoy. And Darksworn, again, is not the only way I'll play the game. I find competitive Valeria is often a lot of fun. But if you feel that the game's a bit too random, if it comes down to the rolls of the dice and just, you know, it just worked out, you had an engine that paid out earlier in the beginning and so that cascaded into more and more as the game went on, if you don't like that, then cooperative Valeria, Darksworn specifically, is going to give you that sense of just more choices, more agency, more fun things you can do while working together with players and going through a series of adventures. And they do escalate nicely in difficulty. So if you want to experience this game, but you just don't want to go head-to-head, or you just don't feel it's strategic enough, but you want that experience, then Darksworn gives it to you in spades. And overall, I like the experience. I like all the things it does. I like the art. This is the game that made me love the Mitchell's art. I love the art. I love the production. I love the swarms of stuff coming your way. I love the fact that every single turn feels satisfying. My biggest and main critiques is, one, the fact that, well, my critique is going to be the citizens not being different enough, and a critique that might be relevant for you is that you might not like the fact that you don't feel starved for resources in this game. You can usually do something good. It's just a question of what good thing are you doing. There is rarely ever a turn where I'm like, I guess I'm doing nothing satisfying. No, you're always doing something satisfying, but sure, maybe I defeat the Treant instead of the Kobolds because I was one shy on my warfare, or I'm trying to figure out what other things I want to do in this turn and juggling all that against each other. Ultimately, I enjoy Valeria very much. I've had it for a long time. It stood the test of time. It's passed every single cull. Every single expansion to me has either been neutral or a positive addition. The modules give you more ways to mix things up, although I don't necessarily recommend chasing every single one of them down. I personally like the agents and the relics. Some of the other smaller ones I don't find add as much. Even the exhausted piles are fine, but don't necessarily enhance my experience that much. It feels like a random event that isn't that interesting. So I play with them. I play with the exhausteds, but not that much. And the ward towers I usually don't bother for. So there are things about the system that don't necessarily add as much to it. But ultimately, if you're looking for a game that plays pretty quickly, quickly is relative, it depends on the player count. To me, this game is best as a 3 or 4 player. It works great at 2 players. Honestly, the solo mode works great if you're playing Darksworn. 3 players is where I think it is best. 4 players starts drifting a little more to adding, and then I've played it at 5, and honestly, it can be a bit more of a slog at 5. Sure, you're still getting the resources, but your economy of actions is just less frequent. Something you have to keep in mind as you play this game is if you're playing this as a 2-player experience, your resource to action ratio is not going to be as high, because for every 2 dice rolls, you're going to have, for every 2 dice rolls, you're going to have 2 actions. If you're playing as a 4-player game, for every 4 dice rolls, you're having 2 actions. And since dice rolls directly translate into resources, the scale of your resource just overpopulation, overflowing, will be higher at higher player counts, and you'll have less time to actually spend your turn on doing different things. So that's going to be a balancing factor around the game. It still doesn't change the fact that the game works, but it might change the types of things you do, or how you balance different resources, or which dukes might be better for that resource overflow. Those are decisions you're going to want to make based on player count. But ultimately, the game is quick, or quick enough. The game is satisfying. It lets you do a lot of things. It is, to me, one of my guilty pleasure games. Is it luck driven? I mean, yes, it is. You're rolling dice every single turn, and an early game lead because of sheer luck of the draw. If I choose to buy a bunch of 1s and you choose to buy a bunch of 7s, and the next thing you know, we're just rolling 1s for those first few turns, even if the rolls aggregate over time, which they generally will do, at the end of the day, I suddenly have a first few turns that is significantly stronger and better off than yours, and so that's definitely present. This game does not do much to mitigate around that early turn luck that can be present, and there's not enough other factors going on that can push the game. And to that end, I'd recommend Darksworn if you want to experience that, but instead of feeling penalized by those rolls, feeling the satisfaction of watching your friend, your ally, your teammate benefit from those good rolls. And so I think Darksworn can be a good way to engage with the game if you like the principle of the game but feel it's not as strategically driven. And if you just don't like this kind of game, then it might just not be a game for you. But ultimately, I highly recommend Valeria Card Kingdoms. To me personally, and I recognize this is not a universally shared opinion, to me personally, it is the best of all the games that have you rolling dice and you get something on everyone else's turn. To me, this is the very best one that I've continued to enjoy, continued to play, and I hope that it's not yet finished. I hope there's still more to come. I don't need more to come, but I'd love to see what else they continue to do with the system. For me, this is a 4.5 out of 5, which is a frankly higher rating than games of this weight class usually get for me, but I can't avoid the fact that I still, even now, I set this up to review the game, and a big part of me wants to just sit down and play it instead. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one. Ricky!